large-scale elements, anchored them around this core, this panopticon core plan of a typical jail. And we actually wanted both the layers to be seen very separately. We wanted that discovery of one layer, and then you discover the other one. So it's the whole charm of that whole interaction between ruin and memory. And that's what we were really working with here. And you can see that our approach is quite, what should I say, pristine, in the sense that we wanted to pare down and remove layers which were just added on in ad hoc manners and throughout the time, and really come back to what was the original sort of structure. Next, please. Again, you have an idea of these huge, gigantic sculptural markers which anchor onto key points in this panopticon story. And also you see the ruin and what is new as separate layers. So you always perceive, hopefully, the base, and then you see the layers that are added on in history. And we felt that that's a reasonable way to look at history, because you have, especially in Bangalore, where you have very minuscule remnants of history left. So how does one really allow that to become part of our experience? Next, please. This is a project we did. We won the 4th place. It was an international competition. And we were, again, it was a 5-kilometer stretch all along the riverfront, which was to be revitalized. And so we, again, really looked very, very deeply, walked the site, looked very deeply at how culture and memory could be re-looked at today for the target group that the client had. And so a lot of it was to do with really looking at old structures and how do you really insert within it, or how do you make new intervention dealing with this very, very rich history of Oporto, which was actually where a lot of the early expeditions started out from Portugal. And so addressing also, interest of the Portuguese in football and cinema, and really making places for these things, fishing, So it's a very complex set of interventions. Next, please. You see the section, and what we were really trying to do with traffic and taking all of the river periphery underground and allowing and basically giving that back to the city. Next, please. This is one of my favorite projects, and it never got built. We won the 2nd place for this. This was at the Bhopal gas tragedy site, and it was a competition, and we had to design a memorial, and we somehow couldn't come to terms with the fact that when the tragedy still continues to today, how can we build a nice building? So we really looked at the whole process of cleaning the site, and we allowed that to really become and give us the clues on how to really treat this topography and really allow a topography to be expressed, which had to do with cleaning. And so, you see this very scarred surface within which certain activities are housed. The whole irony of the fact that you can't even plant a tree there because the soil is so polluted that a child cannot get clean water on that site. So it's really on how to get that back. And what a memorial means in this, that a memorial is a living, engaging thing for the people who've really experienced this. And so this was really a very intense 6 months of work for us. And next, please. And the actual ground zero is very stark, very primary, allowing people to express that pain and that expression. And then finally the release onto a new landscape which is actually planted on clean soil. So this was the whole story there. Next, please. This is something that we've completed. It's still under completion. It's still being completed and will take a couple of maybe a year or so. This is the National Military Memorial opposite the Raj Bhavan. And again, it was for us, more than the program, it was how do we really create something that is a very minimal footprint on the landscape, and therefore how do we express this also in a way that makes sense to the services who've lost their lives. So we actually sunk the entire building underground and allowed the existing trees to really sort of develop the plan. So nothing is really arbitrary. It looks like a very arbitrary drawing, but it's very thoughtful in the sense that every one of those curves has to do with the tree diameter of the roots, how to preserve it, and then how to take movement down, how to create certain dramatic space. And really, essentially, for us, the interest was to give back the park to the city. So it was not really about building a building. Next, please. Next, please. These two projects, again, in a gated community, and something that we don't necessarily agree with as being a healthy, sort of typology for a city which, is thriving. But so we were really looking here at using climate and the understanding of climate to really give us clues and to look critically at it. Not assume that, not assume anything, but really look at which side is getting hotter, which side should this umbrella topi come down lower, which side opens up completely, and allow that to determine also how we organize the functions of the house. So really looking at a certain level, looking at once more the quest for what is the urban contemporary Indian house, if one can simplify it. Next, please. Again, images of the same, and using a very simple palette of colors and tones. Next, please. This is something we've just completed, and it's really the first time we're showing it. It hasn't been published yet. So it's really a house for an artist, a writer and architect, all rolled in one. And so it's a house which is, it's a house which really unravels slowly. And what we did was we inverted the whole idea of, because buildings tend to come up quite close to the boundary, your main sources of light are outside. So what we did is we inverted that whole thing, and we created a very dark, or what should I say, a very intimate, a very closed off opening into the space, which is actually all of this, and that structure was made out of reinforced concrete. And then the periphery opens up with veranda spaces, etc. Next, please. So this is how you read this, and next, please. This is just a little glimpse, again, at my little textile studio. So we just make things for people who want them. And really looking at, and my interest in this is really to look at motives that we are familiar with in our context. So it's to create these local stories, and how to use techniques that we use with the layering of fabric to really create a certain magic. So this is really an exploration of stained glass. This left side image, the right side image, where when this tapestry goes on the window, you actually get that impression of stained glass using fabric, and actually leftover bits of fabric. So this is our interest, to really pick up little stories of things going on in our context. Next, please. This again is one of my favorite rugs, because I don't know if some of us growing up in school in the 70s and 80s in Bangalore will remember the ubiquitous Kambli Buchi, the little caterpillars, the black ones. There used to be seasons when they were everywhere. You don't see them that much now. But these little caterpillars, if you touched them, they would itch. And if you touched them, they would curl up. So as students, you wanted to kind of just play with these things. But that was my story in this, and the sketch was really made by my daughter when she was 7, but the minute I saw it, I thought of Kambli Buchi. So just little stories explored through doodles and sketches to express little things from what you observe around. Next, please. This again is something that we developed as a craft sometime back, inspired by the traditional craft of basketry, and really looked at how do we develop new forms which evoke memory again. So we don't have everything shown here, but there are inspirations from the old rice husking that we used to use. Very contemporary. You won't see the difference, but somewhere a little thread begins to, and that was the whole idea, that when you see something, you see an object, you wonder about it, and you say, could this be that? And so just little explorations. We're hoping to have a collection of lights next year. We're working towards that. Next, please. And again, explorations once more on weaves and jewelry using the same technique. So this is my other passion. Next, please. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nisha. I'd like to welcome Rajesh Shivram for our next presentation. Rajesh is the founder of Techno Architecture. Rajesh can never say no. So when we approached him again during Design Yatra to do an event for us, where we actually had one of his clients, the actor Rania Rao, and him leading us through the journey of the design of her house. Rajesh has been nominated for the Aga Khan Awards in 2010 and also the A+D Young Architect Award. He's a winner. His interests are running marathons, swimming, travel, and he's a huge fan of Roger Federer. So Rajesh, over to you.
Hello everyone, good evening. It feels good to be part of this gathering tonight. First of all, many congratulations to Global Living Emporio for having put up such a great showroom. And also I'd like to thank the entire team of Triple ID to have conceptualized today's event. Past forward, reinventing tradition. Around the world, architects are challenged to infuse new forms with the legacy of the past and spirit of the place. In an age of globalization, this has become a critical issue, especially in emerging nations that have embraced generic modernism in their race to catch up. Now, we've tried to abstract the vernacular with no receipt to mimicry to achieve sustainability by intelligent use of traditional materials and techniques. And coming to the brief given to us, we have a small video presentation that explains the use and the reuse of different traditional materials in its truest form, both in our completed and ongoing projects.
Jeffrey Bawa, and that changed my outlook on design and creativity. Jeffrey Bawa's architecture totally cannot be explained, but must be experienced became my motto.
Hi, my name is Rajesh. I'm a practicing architect in Bangalore, heading a firm, Techno Architecture, in Baswannagudi.
When Triple ID invited me to be part of this event, it was a very joyous moment for me because fast forward, reinventing tradition is actually close to my projects. Baswannagudi being one of the oldest part of Bangalore, what I truly felt was, when I actually took up this place for my own office space, it's a 100-year-old building. And when I started renovating this, a lot of thoughts came into my mind. What exactly to do? I mean, should I keep the natural old technique in place, or should I redo the entire thing, probably using modern materials? So the whole intention was, to blend nature with an internal space. When someone enters my office, the first thing what they're actually greeted by is the old charm of architecture, mainly because the usage of wood, bamboo, red oxide is predominantly seen in the old structure. But the whole point is, when they actually come through another space which we recently renovated, it's completely different because they can actually see the entire world through glass and steel. Another interesting project I want to share today it's called the Earth House. Simply because it's kind of close to me. The whole intent and the design brief given by the client was a very simple, non-sophisticated, practical house. So the clients who are actually coming down from the US, settling here for good, so they had a very clear-cut indication of what they wanted for the house, simply because it was a mix of tradition and modernism. The site, which is about 5,000 square feet, southwest corner plot, was basically divided into two parts. One was, half the area was completely dedicated to landscape and green. The other half the area was built structure.
So what we tried to do was all the spaces and the design elements were overlooking into the garden area, where one could be connected to nature, and that was the core design element in this house. The next option what we had was how to get a little bit of traditional element into the house, which was designed on a more rectangle practical form. So what we tried to do is use brick as one of the core elements and a design element. Exposed brick. The exposed brick, according to me, is one of the most versatile material which can be used today in all forms of architecture and design. Simply because an exposed brick walls are very bold and have a lot of character. So when you come into this house, you see a lot of exposed walls being used internally as well as externally, and a lot of natural light has gone into the house with the help of skylights, a lot of courtyards in the house. So when somebody's sitting in the house, they actually have a feel and a connect between the internal and the external spaces. So once the person goes on the first floor, even from there's a lot of connect between the ground floor and the open spaces. So even these brick walls likewise continue all through the house, right from the entrance portico, into the main door, into the garden area, into the first floor, all the way through, linking external and internal areas. Green to trees. That's another interesting project I'm actually doing right now currently, and it is actually situated in South Bangalore in a 5,000 square feet plot. When the client came to us with the brief, it was a very clear-cut indication that, when I personally visited the site to see the property, there are two beautiful trees in the front, so which I didn't want to cut at any given point of time. So the whole intention was to keep the two trees in